Have you tried a Daovua knife before? If you have not, here's another installment to our Nakiri series, and this week we're taking a look at this Daovua Nakiri. So quick disclaimer, a little over a month ago, I placed an order with Daovua to order a Big Daddy slicer from them. And through our DMs, they find out that I actually do reviews on their knives. They wanted to send me a couple more knives to get some honest opinion and some feedback from me. And so they included a couple more knives. This Nakiri is one of them, so they sent me this knife completely free of charge. But they do understand that all of my reviews and feedback is 100% honest, and I will not be biased just because they sent me this knife for free. And as always, this is a first impression video. We'll come back here in 6 months to see how this baby holds up. Now, if you have not heard of Daovua before, Daovua is a Vietnamese-based knife brand that hand forges these knives out of upcycled spring steel and pipeline steels. The difference between the spring steel and the pipeline steel is, according to 𝐒𝐿𝐹2GO's website, is that the pipeline steel has a better edge retention, and it also comes with a more ergonomic handle, like this one right here. So this is your first exposure to the Daovua brand. This is something that you might want to pay attention before you pull the trigger on one of these knives. These knives are considered by 𝐒𝐿𝐹2GO as quote-unquote project knives. What they mean by project knives is that these knives, out of the box, will need a little bit of TLC. TLC that they're talking about is the edge sharpness. The sharpness straight out of the box is not as sharp as most people want it to be, and it will really benefit from a sharpening straight out of the box. So what I would do is a 1000 grit Kingstone. I'll put a fresh edge on it, and then I'll strap it on just raw leather with no compound. But if you don't have raw leather, you can strap it on cardboard or newspaper, whichever you prefer or whichever you have on hand. And the next TLC item that they're talking about is the fit and finish of the knife. That sometimes the fit and finish, like the handle fit and finish, is not as nice as people want it to be, and you might have to put a little bit of elbow grease into the knife to get it where you want it to be. So this knife retails on 𝐶knives2go's website for $65. And I've read on forums and other places that says that this knife is a $20 knife and that you shouldn't pay $60 or even $40 for this knife. And it is true, you can get this knife for $20 to $30 on AliExpress. But the only caveat to that is there is a 20 knife order minimum. So unless you're going to be buying 20 of these and buying them in bulk, you're not going to be able to lock in that price range. So the best price that I've seen on a single one of these knives is about $65-ish. So let's say this knife retails for $65, okay? Just like on 𝐒𝐿𝐹2GO's website. At the $65 range, if you don't want to take on a project knife or you don't want to gamble your $65 on the fit and finish and things like that, there are definitely, at that price range, other options out there for you. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the specs of the knife. The blade length is about, total blade length is about 7 inches, and the cutting edge is about 6.5 inches long. Now what I really like about this knife is the blade height. The blade height is about 2.25 inches tall, which I really like because there are plenty of clearance. And as you guys know, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I like a taller knife. Now, as previously mentioned, this is made out of the pipeline steel, and if this is anything like the spring steel version or heat treated similarly to the spring steel version, I'd probably say that this knife is heat treated to about a 58 to 59 Rockwell hardness, 60 tops. The knife itself is fairly thin, which is very nice because I do like a thin knife. And right at the spine is about 1.8 millimeters, and right behind the edge is about 0.7 millimeters thick. And the blade leads down to a washed-out handle, and the washed-out handle is not traditional, but it is fairly comfortable in the hands. Now let's take a look at the fit and finish of this knife to see how this came out straight out of the box. The blade is nice and straight. It's not warped. The taper is nice and even. The handle finish is okay. It's comfortable in the hands, that's for sure. But there are definitely some spots, like the coating that they use. There's some runoff / like drip spots that you can see right here in the handle. I'll get some different shots so you guys can see it. And there are just some spots that are just a little bit more rough down here. There's not like smooth all the way. and the gluing right here is not great. The gluing right here, there's a lot of excess epoxy, and the epoxy itself has a lot of like sawdust and other materials stuck in it, so it's definitely not very pretty right here around the glue line. Yeah, so there's that. The taper, I do have to say, is much nicer and much more even than my previous Daowas, like the Spring Steel Gyotto and the Nakiri Nakiri that I have. If you guys haven't seen those videos before, I'll link them up here so that way you guys can check them out. But speaking of this taper, let's go ahead and see how this knife performs. Let's grab a few things and let's get cutting. Alright, so just like always, let's go ahead and start with a paper test. You guys can see here, nothing by this paper. Let's go ahead and see if this guy passes. And it does pass the freestanding paper test, which is good. Let's see and check for some edge consistency. And it looks like the edge is fairly consistent. It's not getting hung up on anything. And this is fresh out of the box. Like, this is fresh out of the box sharpness. So I would say, in comparison to my previous Daowas, the out of the box sharpness has improved in comparison to what I had before. And that's about a year ago or so. So I'd say they had made a little bit of improvement to their knives. But again, mine was spring steel, not pipeline steel. So maybe that's the difference on the pipeline versus the spring steel, is that the quality is a little bit better. Next thing we'll do, let's go ahead and do a tomato test. I know it seems like a little bit of marketing, and maybe it is, but I have found the test to be decent. You know, it's not the all-telling test, but it's not bad. As you guys can see here, tomato is cutting through. So I would say the tomato test does pass. Let's go ahead and move on to the grape test and see how that performs. For those of you guys who don't use or haven't used carving knives before, always make sure your knives are wiped off, so that way it's just good habit to have. Okay, next thing, these are the nicest grapes I could find at the store, so please bear with me. Okay, let's see, and it passes the grape test with no issue. So this is good. This is very good. So no trouble with the grape test, which is nice. And this week we're going to introduce the potato. Okay, I know a lot of people have said that the potato is a really good way to test a knife's edge and their profile. So let's go ahead and try it, because I think the potato is very similar to your carrot, where if the knife wedges at all, it'll split it open. And people have said that the potato tells a lot. And as far as I can see right now, the potato test is going pretty well. It slices clean through, no wedging. As far as I can tell right now, the knife is performing pretty well. Now, my favorite, the carat test. As you guys know, I've always said, I think because the carat is a little bit harder, and if there are any kind of overly thick edge behind the knife, it will wedge and split the carat much easier than it would with a potato because it's just a little bit softer. So that's why I like using the carat test quite a bit. As you guys can see, no wedging, which is nice. And let's see how thin we can actually get this. It's pretty darn thin without splitting it, so don't know if you guys can see it, but it's pretty thin. Okay, so as you guys can see, out of the cut test, that this knife actually performed pretty well out of the box. I was actually not expecting it to be as sharp straight out of the box with my previous experience with the spring steel versions, but I gotta say, they've improved their sharpness straight out of the box, so I am pleased with it. Let's go ahead and move on to the profile itself. The profile, there is a large portion of it about right here. That is all completely flat, which is nice for a Nakiri. But outside of that, there is a slight belly that allows you to rock the knife a little bit. So if you're looking for a bit of a hybrid and not a completely traditional profile of a Nakiri, this might be a good choice. But personally, I would much rather them leaving this knife completely flat across instead of tapering like this. Like, I would really like to see this knife as just straight across as a short Chinese cleaver, I guess, instead of this tapering. But that's just a personal preference thing and doesn't have to really do with, you know, just a personal choice on design instead of a fit and finish issue. So anyhow, this wraps up another episode of our Nakiri series. Last week we took a look at a Nakiri made from Thailand. This week we took a look at a Nakiri made from Vietnam. Next week we're going to be taking a look at a Nakiri made in a different country, and then we will circle all the way back around to one actually made in Japan. So if you guys like this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It'll mean the world to me. It'll help me support all of this madness, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.